5 o'clock, so I'm going to open our meeting. Welcome everyone. The audio and video of this meeting is being recorded. It's also being live streamed to the community via the City of Hobart's YouTube channel. For those elected members joining us virtually, Councillor Sherlock and Alderman Thomas, please remember to keep your camera turned on in order to be recorded as present. And also, because we're not all on Zoom, you'll need to raise your hand if you'd like to speak, and if you're desperate, call out, but we'll be keeping an eye on you to make sure we spot you if you'd like to speak. If there's any elected member who hasn't already signed into the meeting in accordance with the COVID-19 plan, please do so now using the camera on your mobile device and scan the QR code. I'd like to request that all mobile devices be turned off or put to silent. And for the purposes of recording, just wait, if you can wait for myself to announce you before you speak, and just also be a bit conscious that the sound of glasses clinking and water pouring is being picked up in the recording, so we're just trying to keep that as clean as we possibly can. Apologies tonight, we have an apology from Alderman Zuko. There are no leave of absences. So I'd like to start with an acknowledgement to country, as we always do, in recognition of the deep history and culture of this place. I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which the City of Hobart was built. I acknowledge the determination and resilience of the Palawa people of Tasmania, who have survived invasion and dispossession and continue to maintain their identity, culture and rights. I recognise the value of continuing Aboriginal knowledge and cultural practice, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. The minutes of our last meeting was held on the 7th of December. Moved, Lord Mayor. By Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Councillor Sherlock. All those in favour of the minutes say aye. Aye. Alderman Thomas and Councillor Sherlock? You aye? That's fine. Thank you. That's passed unanimously. Transfer of agenda items. Are there any items proposed for transfer on either the open or the closed agenda? There being none, moving to item 3, which is communications from the Chair. And I do have quite a number, some really interesting things for the Council this meeting. So just to start with, we have the City of Hobart was presented with a Tasmanian Human Rights Week Award for 2020, which is really excellent. That was for the Council's Hobart Respects All campaign. The award was presented to myself and the staff who were responsible for designing the campaign on the 10th of December, and the following citation was read out by the judges. In March 2020, the City of Hobart launched the Hobart Respects All initiative in response to evidence of rising racism. Their messages of kindness, gratitude and respect appeared on metro buses, shopping bags, stickers, posters and street banners. The messages empowered bystanders to show kindness to anyone experiencing racism by supporting them. It's everyone's responsibility to help make our community inclusive and respectful. The judges commend the City of Hobart, and with great honour that a key agent of government showed the courage to use the language that inspires the deep awareness and tenderness within our beings that dissolves racism. And they did not shirk from calling out or calling that empowering quality by its name, kindness. So congratulations to all of the staff that were involved in that project. Another award since our last meeting is the 2020 Awards for Planning Excellence Tasmania, and this is in November 2020. This happened in November. The Planning Institute of Australia recognised council with an award for planning excellence in the category of improving planning processes and practices for the project Connected Hobart Smart City Framework and Action Plan. So congratulations to everyone involved. I'll also particularly mention Director Peter Carr, who was leading the team involved in putting together the Connected Hobart Smart City Framework and Action Plan. So another award there, which is fantastic. And I'd also like to advise the meeting that as part of my role as Lord Mayor and the 8 specific roles and duties as set out under Section 27 of the Local Government Act, I have produced an annual report. The report details the activities undertaken in my capacity as Lord Mayor to meet those obligations in the past 12 months. The report is available on the Council website, and it details the number of civic and ceremonial events, receptions hosted, media interviews conducted, meetings held with state and federal MPs, and a range of other information of interest to the community. And finally, I won't try and pick that up. There's a, thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. On Tuesday the 15th of December, in an official call, I received the Consul General of the Republic of Indonesia, the Honourable Ms. Spasa Tutunatuniwa, and Vice Consul Mr. Alphonse Sroya. This gift for the city was given and will be displayed in the Henry Hunter Reading Room. It's a traditional building from Sumatra, and the architecture is designed to provide strength in the face of extreme weather. So thank you. That's all the communications from the Chair.
Lord Mayor, I wonder if I can just add to the communication from the Chair, just to point out that the meeting note that on Monday the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy announced that you've been invited to join its board of mayors and city leaders. Congratulations. The Global Covenant Board leads the largest global alliance for city climate leadership, representing more than 10,000 cities around the world committed to addressing climate change. The board is co-chaired by Michael Bloomberg, who was the former mayor of New York and the founder of Bloomberg Philanthropies and Bloomberg LP, and also Frans Timmermans, who's the European Commission Executive Vice President. I understand that you'll be joining 9 other mayors around the world in overseeing this important city collaboration, and you'll be a voice for the 37 Global Covenant of Mayors cities located in Oceania, which are home to more than 6 million residents who probably most likely impacted by climate change. Oceania has been devastated by the accelerating and worsening impacts of the climate energy emergency, including unprecedented bushfires and rising sea levels. It's an honour for the council and the city, and you, Lord Mayor, will take up this 2-year position, and this builds on the work of this council to take action on climate change for more than 20 years. So congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now moving on to item 4 is notification of council workshops. There have been none. Public question time. Are there any public questions?
No, Lord Mayor.
No. Are there any petitions?
No, Lord Mayor.
Okay. Supplementary items. There are none. So we're moving on now to indications of pecuniary conflicts of interest. Do any elected members wish to indicate an interest in any item appearing on the open council agenda? There being none, we will now move into the City Planning Committee, and I note that we are now acting as a planning authority, and we'll just wait for one moment because I think there's a couple of extra people coming in to observe this next item. We are moving on to item 9.1, which is 19 View Street, Sandy Bay, and once everyone is seated, I'll ask the Deputy Lord Mayor to introduce this item.
Already seated yet?
No? Or maybe we'll just get started. Oh, there they are. Thanks, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Lord Mayor, I'll move this item 19 View Street, Sandy Bay, partial demolition, alterations, extension and front fence for refusal.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock.
Thank you. Lord Mayor, you might remember that this had come to our planning meeting back on the 16th of November, and it was then considered by the planning committee and suggested that it be refused on heritage grounds, which was contrary to the officer's position. Since then, at the council meeting on the 23rd of November, we resolved to defer the item so that the applicants and representatives could discuss things, and those discussions occurred with thanks to the manager of development appraisal. But unfortunately, there wasn't any real shift, which caused some frustration, I think, on both sides. But sometimes it's good to at least facilitate and try for some sort of more common ground. After discussion at committee again and various representations, it was still deemed, the committee felt that it was still should be recommended for refusal. It was a vote, I think, 5-1 this time for the refusal based on heritage grounds. Lord Mayor, the Golf Links estate and certainly the neighbours felt that this proposal was really pushing the building envelope, if you like, and pushing the nature and what they really love about what the representatives really love about that part of Sandy Bay and why they live there. Whilst the application technically is probably obviously it was recommended for approval by the planners, it does push all of the envelopes and could probably go either way, certainly with the planning heritage grounds. So it was really felt that this was not appropriate, and that there was a real incursion on the heritage values of the place and the culture of the place. So hence the continued position of the committee to recommend for refusal.
Further discussion? Councillor Sherlock or Thomas? No? Councillor Dutton.
Yeah, I have a question, Lord Mayor, thank you very much. And the question is, and I put it through you to the Director, it is my understanding that in the committee we were informed that once the development application falls within the building envelope, it doesn't trigger the discretion as far as the loss of amenity or foreshadowing is concerned. If this is true or not, and then in addition to that, if it is true, does that mean that our discretion under the Heritage Code is then also taken away, and we do not have that? Thank you.
Mr. Noy.
Yes, through you, Chair. It is true that it does comply with the building envelope requirements, and therefore issues of residential amenity, not a discretionary aspect to this application. However, it does not mean that the Heritage Code does not apply. There is a discretion so far as the Heritage Code is concerned, and because it's, the proposal is located within a heritage precinct.
Thank you.
Further discussion?
Yeah.
Councillor Dutton.
Lord Mayor, for me, I have sat through this particular item twice in the committee, and we had quite a full and lengthy discussions, and both sides of the arguments were presented. And no doubt we have two views on this matter. And for me, there are only three issues, very simple. Firstly, whether the Heritage Code provision under Clause 13E are still relevant and for us to make this decision. And the answer was given to us, yes, it is still very relevant. Issue two is, if this is relevant, this particular Heritage Code, do we have the discretion? Yes, the discretion, because it came in under the answer that was given to us, that once it fulfills the development envelope, then the discretion does not trigger, it's finished. But our discretion to still take the decision as elected members under the Heritage Code still stands. And so therefore, firstly, it is still relevant. Secondly, we still have the discretion. And my third issue is this. Under the Heritage Code, whether the relevant clauses is satisfied or not. And there are two answers. Firstly, there is one answer, and both professional. Yes, it is satisfied, and the staff therefore has made that recommendation. On the contrary, we also have other professionals who have said, no, it does not satisfy that particular clause E13. And it is my discretion that I use to say I would support the refusal. Just because my discretion is different to someone else's does not in any way mean or imply that my discretion is inferior. So therefore, I stand by the decision of the committee. Thank you.
Okay, further discussion? There's no further discussion, so I'll put that recommendation for refusal. All those in favour say aye.
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 Against say no.
No.
Okay, I need a show of hands. So all those in favour?
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Coates, Councillor Ewan, Alderman Briscoe, Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
Against?
I'm against.
Alderman Sexton, Councillor Sherlock, Alderman Barakis and Alderman Thomas.
So it is carried, Lord Mayor, 7 votes to 4.
Great, thank you.
Do you want to do the changeover?
Okay, so that item's now closed. So anyone who was here for 9.1, we're now moving on to item 9.2. I'll just wait, because item 9.2 might have some people coming as well. I'm not sure. Okay, item 9.2.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. 7 Nixon Street, Sandy Bay. The proponents have asked that the matter be withdrawn to be reconsidered at the next round of standard meetings. So I move that it be withdrawn.
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Barakis. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against say no. It's passed unanimously. Item 9.3.
Lord Mayor, this is 9 Kooyong Glen, South Hobart, subdivision boundary adjustment. I'll move the item.
Seconded by Alderman Barakis.
Lord Mayor, this is on the corner of Romilly and Kooyong Glen, so we go back to South Hobart again this meeting. The proposal includes an amalgamation of 2 titles of 45 square metres and 643 square metres, and the adjustment of boundaries to create 2 titles, one being 385 and the other 303 square metres in area, so more balanced. The proposed lot 1 will have an area of 385 square metres and contain the existing dwelling, and the lot is a corner lot and will have 11.94 metre frontage to Romilly Street and a 24.72 metre frontage to Kooyong Glen. The other one is slightly squishy, if you like, and there were actually 10 representations relating to this. So it's, whilst we're only considering a subdivision and we're not actually considering a dwelling, the applicant suggested that they would have a 1-bedroom single-storey dwelling. That was proposed. I don't think that provides much comfort for the representors who are concerned about the loss of amenity, possibly because that would be so close to the boundary, particularly with the block of units. So they were fairly vociferous and concerned as representors, which I have some sympathy with. However, this is at this point a subdivision, so we're not considering a house, and presumably we would have this before us again once it does, and probably would be likely to invoke some discretion, so it would probably come back to us.
Further discussion? No further discussion. I'll put that item. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 9.4.
This is the favourite on the agenda for Councillor Harvey tonight. 646A Sandy Bay Road, Sandy Bay, alterations to Washdown Bay. I'll move that, Lord Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Harvey. Anyone like to speak to this item? No? Okay. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 9.5.
Out of 10?
Oh, sorry, 10.
Yep. Lord Mayor, this is quite an interesting one. It's a petition to amend the sealed plans 167721, which is 7 Montrevale Rise. I'll move the item as it is.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock.
Lord Mayor, we don't often get this kind of petition. I think there's only been one other one in my 15 years on council, so it's a bit of a novelty where we're acting as not as a planning authority as such, but kind of judge and jury in relation to matters. So we received a petition to amend a sealed plan from the owners of 7 Montrevale Rise in Dunurn, which is known as Lot 9. The petition sought to amend a covenant appearing on SP 167721, burdening Lot 9. The effect of amending the covenant is that it will enable the petitioner to construct multiple dwellings on the lot. And the petition has received a number of objections from the surrounding owners who will be affected by the amendment. As the request is opposed, Council was required to hold a hearing in accordance with Section 104 of the Local Government Building and Miscellaneous Provisions Act of 1993. So we heard it on the 2nd of December at the City Planning Committee meeting, and there's a copy of the petitioners' and objectors' submissions, or multiple copies at item 3.1 of that agenda of the 2nd of December. And what we resolved at that committee, that the item be deferred to enable written submissions from the petitioner to the council and the parties on what may be the appropriate sharing arrangements towards the right-of-way within the schedule of easements to enable the maintenance burden to be equally shared. This is quite complicated, so that's why, hence I'm reading this out from notes from Ms Turner. The petitioner was invited to provide written submissions as to what would be an appropriate amendment to the schedule of easements to provide for an equal cost and maintenance burden sharing arrangement towards the right-of-way in the event that council were minded to cause the amendment to be made with modification pursuant to section 104.3a of that Provisions Act. And the objectors were invited to respond to the petitioner's submissions. So the matters of relevance, the council officers identified that there were various other subdivisions on other lots, and also that this covenant wasn't imposed by council, so it was a covenant between the vendor and purchaser. The petitioner has obtained a waiver of the covenant from the vendor, and therefore the amendment is not necessary for the petitioner to construct multiple dwellings on the lot. And there are maintenance provisions of the schedule of easements. A number of lots on the sealed plan have been further subdivided and are now contained on new sealed plans. So it looks like there's been further subdivisions. So the council has three options. They have the power to refuse the amendment, approve the amendment with or without modification, and if the amendment is approved, determine if, as a condition of making the amendment, that any person who benefits the amendment is to make compensation in money or land to a person who is injured to buy it. So the objectors were requested to give the petitioner and the council full particulars in writing of any claim by the 23rd of November, and there was no claim received. We've since had emails back and forth to suggest that that they didn't know about it, but actually they did. There's evidence to suggest that. And essentially the motion, I think moved by Alderman Briscoe at committee, was to refuse, in a nutshell, to refuse the petition. So hence why I move that.
Discussion.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, this was a bit of a complex one, I think, to sift through, both in on Monday's meeting and as well on the previous meeting when this came up. I think it is relevant to note, and I know that it was, a relevant point made by the representatives against this. There was the issue of fairness, and they'd indicated that they'd bought the property where they'd bought under the understanding that there was only going to be one dwelling on this lot. But the statement was made that we only bought a property here because we thought that clause 7 in the covenant, which was the one limiting one dwelling on the property, was legitimate and was going to be there to stay. But I think it really does need to be reinforced that if clause 7 was a legitimate clause and people bought their property adjacent to that under the proviso that was going to be legitimate, then clause 9 must also be just equally as legitimate. And clause 9 stated, I don't have the exact wording here, that the vendor, which is the person who sold the property in the first place, had the right to amend, waive, or otherwise change the covenant. And the covenant was between the vendor and the person who bought the property. There was no arrangement made with any other third party. And I think, from a legal standing, we can talk about what we think is sort of fair or unfair in this situation. From a legal standing, if the clause said and the contract said that the vendor had the right to do something, it's not the right to ask the council. It's not the right to request anybody. It says they have the right to amend it. Then, my take on this is that we would be erring in our decision making should we not grant that as per their right. At the end of the day, as has been said and as is stated in the report, it doesn't really make that much difference because whilst they've got the right to amend it, they've also got the right to waive it. So we're kind of playing with semantics here. But I think if we're talking about what the correct thing is to do from a technical standpoint, I would say that we should be actually granting this. So I'd be voting against the refusal. Once again, at the end of the day, I'm not sure if it makes much difference functionally because the houses are going to be built regardless. So it's not like it makes a huge amount of difference.
Can I just ask a question? I understand that this subdivision was fairly controversial at the time. I don't think I was on council, but wasn't council's desire to see less density in the upper reaches because of access and bushfire prone and landslip issues and a whole range of things? Was that? How did we reflect that? Didn't we put anything in our subdivision requirements or Part 5 agreements or anything?
Lord Mayor, the issue with the subdivision, I believe, there was that sentiment, I think, among some elected members, but the proposal as submitted satisfied the provisions of the planning scheme in place at the time, and therefore council and the officers felt obliged to recommend approval of the proposal.
But that was based on there being one dwelling on those upper properties, wasn't it?
No, well, council approved, alternative applications, which the applicant was entitled to make under the provisions of the planning scheme at the time. So, council, I think rightly, was obliged to approve those applications, notwithstanding, I think, some sentiment that the provision should be are not appropriate in that location.
All right. Any further discussion? Any comments from the screen? No. All right. Oh, sum up, please.
Yeah, just in response to Alderman Barakis, I take his point that it might be his opinion, but we're here to make a decision, and that decision could go one of three ways, and I think it still stands from the committee that is the most appropriate in this instance.
Okay, I'll put that recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no.
Aye.
Show of hands. All those in favour.
Alderman Sexton, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Ewan, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe, Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
Against?
Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis.
Carried, Lord Mayor, 9 votes to 2.
Okie doke. Now, I think we're moving on to
Still going.
11. Yes, 11. And we're still in the Planning Authority. Yep.
Yes. Lord Mayor, this is an amendment to PSA 18.2 for 66 Summerhill Road rezoning. It's the consideration of representation.
Second by Alderman Briscoe.
Lord Mayor, as part of the statutory process for any sort of planning scheme amendment, it has to go out for public consultation, and in this instance there was only one representation in relation to this proposed change to the planning scheme in the vicinity of, or the end of Summerhill Road, at 66 Summerhill Road. So it's a rezoning. Those various points which were made were responded to in a report which was sent up to committee, and essentially the points by the representor were noted, and there were no changes to the proposed rezoning. So at our meeting on the 26th of October, we resolved to initiate that planning scheme amendment to the interim planning scheme to rezone the property at 66 Summerhill Road to low density residential from environmental management, environmental living and general residential. The amendment will also extend the biodiversity protection area overlay across the rezoned area, which is a good thing given that's right next to Summerhill Road. And I might just ask Mr Noy, just for clarification, so that this subdivision includes part of Knocklofty or not?
Through you, Chair, no, it doesn't.
Thank you. Yep, I just had difficulty reading the plan or the map in relation to this. So, in essence, this is probably a better outcome for this area, with greater protection for the biodiversity protection area overlay. And once we sign this off, that will come into effect. So moved, Lord Mayor.
Any discussion? All right, I'll put the item. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. It's carried unanimously. Item 12, petition Ridgeway Rural Living Zone. Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I'll move the item that be received and noted.
Seconded by Councillor Dutta. Oh.
Lord Mayor, this is a petition that came to us from 40 residents of Ridgeway community, and they were, the request in the petition was to the concerns raised in the petition was that council does not sufficiently adhere to the provisions in the rural living zone, in particular clauses 13.1.3 A and B, and the objective to clause 13.4.2. So that's around desired future character statements and setbacks. There is quite a lot of detail in the report as a response, and we had the lead petitioner give a deputation at committee, which I think was very useful, because what essentially is coming out of this item, and probably 19 View Street as an item as well, is the desire for people who live in a particular area of this city to retain some of those aspects. And there was a question about whether Ridgeway's character, the setbacks and so forth were really being adhered to or considered. Now, we know that planning schemes are objective to some degree, but there's some subjectivity when it comes to the performance criteria, which has pluses and minuses. So it's quite difficult always to get to retain that character, those special parts, particularly in this instance, Ridgeway being more of a village setting rather and quite rural, and being able to maintain that when there are development applications that come before us. Now, as a council, we look at things, development applications as they come one by one, and so you might get an erosion of what is special in a place. So we can't always protect against that, but there was discussion with the lead petitioner in relation to having further discussion with the community. I think Councillor Harvey might have suggested that as an amendment, and which forms part of this motion. So there is that chance for community groups to be motivated to have a look at planning scheme amendments, and that may be something, although it was unclear whether that was really what was desired by the lead petitioner. So quite an interesting one. So I'm happy to move that.
Further discussion, Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. We did have some correspondence that the lead petitioner is not so keen on having that community engagement process now, so I'm not sure whether we should remove that or change a word potentially to say engagement process be considered rather than be undertaken, until we understand whether there's other people that would like an engagement process. So I'm not quite sure. What do you think, Deputy? If I can ask it. Well,
I think that was the intention from the email that I got this afternoon, or this morning, that I read this afternoon.
So the question for me is, do we delete that aspect of it as an amendment, or do we continue with that? So, yeah, I didn't expect there to be a change in this. So I'm just concerned that we may be doing something that's not necessarily wanted by the lead petitioner, but might be wanted by other people in the community as well. So should we...
What was the original request of the petition?
Well, I don't think there was a request as such. It was just that council need to pay closer attention to the performance criteria in order to protect the village kind of feel at Ridgeway.
Right.
Because they were concerned that that was being eroded over time because the performance criteria wasn't protecting setbacks and things. However, it was explained by the director that the performance criteria is about helping to assist developments occur by weighing it off or balancing it off against other factors like not having to clear land in another location. You know, so there's a lot of elements that need to be considered, and we were hoping to engage with the community to maybe elaborate on that a bit more thoroughly, but now we're in a situation where do we continue to do that or just leave it alone?
I suggest, Lord Mayor, that perhaps Councillor Harvey might want to just have a full stop after received and noted, and delete with the community engagement process to be undertaken with the Ridgeway residents, because that doesn't preclude that, but it can be considered at some other time.
Well, you have moved it, so you can move.
No, I can't.
No.
Okay, well, I'll move that we delete that other part.
That's an amendment from Councillor
Yeah,
Harvey. Would
I'll
someone
move
like
an
to
amendment that
second
we-
that?
We do what the deputy suggested.
I'll second that, Lord Mayor.
Seconded by Alderman Barakis. We'll put the amendment first. Would all those in favour of the amendment say aye?
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Anyone else like to speak on the substantive motion? Nope. Okay, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 13, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yes, I move, Lord Mayor, that the building and planning stats for the 1st to the 30th of November 2020 be received and noted.
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Thomas. Any discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 14, motion from Councillor Ewan.
Thank you. I'd just like to move the item, thanks. If I could have a seconder, please.
Seconded by Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you. So I think we're all acutely aware of the housing crisis in our community, specifically availability and affordability being at record lows. We now have peer-reviewed data demonstrating the significant impact of short-stay accommodation on our local rental market, and in the absence of action from the state, it is a matter of responsible governance and planning for us to regulate it. There have been many comments and concerns raised around this, which I'll attempt to respond to, but before I do, I'd like someone to move a very minor amendment so that the motion specifically addresses whole home listings, as I don't think any of us here have any issues with people letting out spare rooms in their homes.
How did you want that amendment? Is someone able to move that?
Someone would like to move that as a minor amendment, or is it? I'd just like the motion to reflect that we're only referencing whole home listings and not somebody letting out a spare room in there.
Where you need to suggest the actual wording, Councillor.
Apologies.
Okay. So you can amend that with the consent of the seconder, but you'd need to be specific if you can, please, Councillor Ewan.
So just where we're talking about short stay accommodation, it specifically says whole home listings.
So being converted to whole home listing short stay accommodation.
Yes, please, thank you.
The insertion of the word whole home short stay accommodation.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
I accept that in.
Great, thank you, Councillor Burnett. So as my respected colleague, Councillor Dutta, says, I have 3 points to make. The first point is around the data quality. So researchers at UTAS, Ahuri and other highly reputable institutions use inside Airbnb to inform their data. This to me suggests that it's about as reliable as it can get, without Airbnb actually releasing their own data, which I and many others have requested on numerous occasions and has been promised, but they refuse to do so. Discrepancies between inside Airbnb data and data released by the government under the Short Stay Accommodation Act can partially be explained by a lack of clarity in the Act itself. It does not contain a definition for a person's primary place of residence, and there is no burden of proof as it is all self-declared. This means that a person can have a single piece of mail addressed to them as the owner of a property, and they can claim it if they wanted to, that this is their primary place of residence, even if they only live there for 2 weeks of a year. Even with this flawed data, the government's own findings demonstrate that over 48% of listings on these platforms are multi-listings, meaning that the owner has 2 or more properties listed on the platform. The second point I'd like to address is the request received for this report to incorporate new and more accurate information on homelessness. While this is an issue I know we are all passionate about, as Professor Phibbs says, the short stay accommodation issue is not directly about homelessness, it is about having a functional rental market. I suggest that we investigate the issue before us as a planning matter and that we look at how we can get more accurate and reliable data on homelessness in a separate body of work. The third point I want to address is around the complexity of the housing crisis and the argument that capping short stay accommodation isn't going to fix it. Because of course it's not going to fix the whole issue. But as the COVID experiment demonstrates, even a small shift in our local market and a couple of hundred homes can have a significant impact on our local vacancy rate and affordability. We're not going to solve intergenerational inequality, racism, colonialism, dynastic wealth, the lack of social housing, changing global markets, and all the other moving parts that impact housing affordability for our local community when we are part of an enormous global community under late capitalism. But we have evidence that says doing this one thing will help a bit, then we owe it to our people to give the city back to its residents. It shouldn't only be the wealthy and well-connected who have their interests looked after. We have done this for the residents of Battery Point. Why not for the residents of our whole local government area? I commend the motion to you all tonight and sincerely hope you can support it. Thank you.
Further discussion, Alderman Barakis.
Just a question. I'm not sort of much ready to speak yet. In regards to that, through you, in regards to that amendment that you put forward, just in regards to whole home, would I'm just trying to get the right, to make sure we've got the best wording. Would non-primary residents be a better way of wording that, as far as stripping off, you know, maybe not because us would. If somebody, you know, say went on a holiday for a week and rented out their entire house as an Airbnb, does that count as a whole home, or you know, even though it doesn't necessarily contribute to the, you know, the rental market debate, or are we like, would non-primary residents be a better word? I'm happy to.
Yeah, I mean, it's really up to the mover and the seconder, but I think this is.
I appreciate that. I guess sorry, but we can't tell. We don't have the data. We don't know where people do and don't live as their primary place of residence because it's all self-declared. So I'm not too sure how we'd actually separate that out. We don't actually have that information. So I would like to keep it as whole home listings at this point.
Yeah, and probably the director can be, is the idea of this report is to provide all the data, isn't it, anyway? Director?
Yes, Lord Mayor, it is, but I do take the point that Alderman Barakis is raising, because even though you are renting out on the short stay platform your primary home, it is only for a short period, so it is a whole home that is being leased out. So the primary residence may be a better target sort of profile that we're looking at, notwithstanding the difficulty of determining whether it is their primary place of residence. So I think the suggestion is a good one, but I appreciate the challenge between determining whether it is their primary place of residence or not. But so that helps.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Councillor Ewan.
Thank you. Yeah, not really, but thank you. I guess the report could look sort of at both options. I don't think that it's being restrictive. If we're just talking about whole home listings, I guess you could attempt to sort of break that down for us as well. Yes? Yep.
Just as
Alderman
another
Briscoe.
question, yes, in the committee, and I expressed the first. Remember, this is a heavily heavily amended motion, that it was merits or otherwise, because the merits just gives one side of the ledger. In the committee, the amendment that was accepted by you and Councillor Ewan was merits or otherwise, and that or otherwise doesn't appear there anymore. In other words, it's the pros and the cons. The merits on its own is just looking at the merits, not the pros and cons. So I wonder if I ask you and Councillor Ewan to move back to what you agreed to in the committee.
I might ask the General Manager. I don't recall the particular wording exactly, but did someone record it exactly? I don't remember.
Maybe Mr Noy can clarify, Lord Mayor.
Noy.
Through you, Lord Mayor, it certainly was intended in looking at the merits of each option to also cover the otherwise, and happy for that wording to be included if it assists in clarifying that for the purposes of council.
So I think, yeah, the director's saying that the wordings cover, merits means, you know, merits or non-merits really. But Councillor Ewan, it's your motion, did you want to accept that in?
The motion that we've got says, and their merits. So to me, I think that's enough. I'm quite happy to leave it as it is. And we do have quite a huge body of evidence that demonstrates the merits of regulating the short stay accommodation. So I'm not too sure.
Look, if we looked at the tape, I suggest the wording, Lord Mayor, through you. I'll do my, if it's okay, I did suggest the merits or otherwise, and I think we've got enough emails from us to realise that it's not a totally negative thing. There is some, and an article in the paper today also demonstrate there's some incredible benefit financially or economically to the city of Hobart. And so if you just say merits or otherwise, you're covering, look, I'm almost accepting on good faith what the director said, that he will cover all otherwise, in other words, the negatives of putting controls. But I do know from a number of sources that during the lockdown period, cleaners lost their jobs. Supply firms who supplied the short stay accommodation business, including hotels and motels, were struggling. So there is a significant economic benefit of having short stay accommodation in Hobart. And one personal one I know, the person didn't have a job for 9 months because of the closure of short stay accommodation. If we don't look at the merits or otherwise, then you're going to get only one side of the story. And if I support this motion tonight, it'll be for that reason, that there will be the positives and the negatives in a report, so we can actually make up our mind whether or not to try to put more controls over short-term accommodation operators.
Okay, so I think we're moving on from the otherwise bit. Alderman Thomas.
Thank you. But we did have a little bit of distortion in those couple of those last three speakers, but nevertheless, Lord Mayor, I'd like to put forward, and it is held by Craig Garr, four points to be included, either added in or put on as a foreshadow. The reason and the rationale for this is that this city will be very carefully looked at and scrutinised in terms of what we're doing. Initiatives are fantastic, and I think it's really progressive, and I welcome the motion being put in. But I also look at the word efficiency, effectiveness and completeness of the review, and I think that even from the number of emails we've had either supporting or querying, the four items that I have put forward, I think will give a level of comfort to those that the decision that we ultimately make might go against, and certainly in terms of crossing the T's and dotting the I's, we'll have done it. And there's a rationale to this. That for the council to manipulate an economic driver, which indeed, as Alderman Briscoe just mentioned, there's 426 jobs reportedly impacted by Airbnb. This will have an impact on property owners whose reasons for short-term rental will be many and varied. Local government should operate in the best interests of the whole community, and where a section of that community will be arguably disadvantaged for whatever reason, yet on the basis of overall good, there must be sage, cogent and authoritative reasons for so doing. By adding into the motion the words set forth in 1 to 4 above, or proposing it by way of an amendment, will guarantee that this council has the precise facts at hand to make a reasoned and supportive decision. So what I'm actually looking for, and certainly I'd commend the Deputy General Manager for getting some of this information partly prepared already. The level of homelessness in the City of Hobart currently projected to the end of 21, as provided by an independent, objective and reputable source. The level of Airbnb properties which are currently known are reported as partial. Well, we've probably dealt with this by the amendment introduced by Councillor Ewan, entire property. And I've taken into account the T21 projections, which show 30% of tourism back next year of 2019 numbers, which is 1.5 million for the state, and growing to 50% of 2019 figures in 22, and back to 100% or above in 23. The economic return to property owners from Airbnb entire property lettings in calendar year 2019, and an important one, elected officials, the current proportion by bed number of underutilised emergency and short-term accommodation which receives state government or other source financial support to operate. The reason I've said that one is that the Minister for Housing last year reported upon a new software program that was going to enable him or the government to receive regular reporting on what is not being taken up in bed spaces by emergency accommodation. Now, there are a lot of reasons why there will occasionally be underutilised space. Now, if it goes down to efficiency of the operation, the way they operate, the lack of staff or whatever it is, that could mean 10% overall on top of the numbers of people who aren't able to get accommodation, which will have an incredible impact, I suggest, on this motion. So if we were losing 10% through inefficient operation of those operators, those institutions, then it will have an impact. And I believe that if we do this report properly, those 4 items shouldn't scare people. They should make you feel proud that we're doing your job properly. So I'd ask that those 4 items are added into the motion.
Okay, so I'll ask Councillor Ewan and Deputy Lord Mayor if they would like that moved in, or whether we move that as an amendment.
No, thank you. I think this is going to be too much information on too many diverse issues for the purview of this report, so I won't accept them. Thank you.
Okay.
And I'll foreshadow it, Lord Mayor, and hope that for sanity's sake this is acceptable.
So, Alderman Thomas, that could be an amendment. It's not a foreshadowed motion.
Oh, no, good. Okay, yes, well, I'll put
An amendment.
It forward as an amendment.
Okay, so we've got this amendment before us. Oh. I need a seconder for the amendment.
I'll second it.
Alderman Sexton, would anyone like to speak to the amendment?
Yes, Lord Mayor and Lord Mayor, I rise to speak against the amendment, and I appreciate what Alderman Thomas is suggesting, but I think this is going to really complicate the item, which is quite straightforward and is a big enough task as it is. And I've got reasons. I have done quite a lot of research over the last couple of days just in relation to this, and have spoken with various academics and also Mr. Ben Bartle, who's the principal at the Tenants' Union. And just in relation to the first point, the current level of homelessness in the city is quite evident. So there is a significant amount of homelessness, and there is plenty of information relating to this, and it's provided by an independent, objective and reputable source. So we're getting it from the Ahuri, who's relying on inside Airbnb because the Airbnb information is not being released, which Councillor Ewan has said. Now, there are places in the world which mandate release of information. So Barcelona mandates Airbnb releasing information on how much custom they have and how many places they have. So there is significant reliable information which is used by many academics and academic institutions and organisations. So to suggest that we don't have those figures, I think is not accurate. So the economic return for Airbnb for entire property lettings, again, we're not privy to that information, and unless the government, or I don't know if we can, through you to the General Manager, would we be able to mandate that as a request for Airbnb to give us reliable information?
We could certainly request it.
So we could, I think we might have requested it over the time anyway, and it hasn't been forthcoming. But the state government could mandate that. Yes, okay, so the state government, and that might come out of this report as well. What can we ask the state government to do in relation to this? The current underutilised emergency and short-term accommodation which receives state government or other source financial support to operate. Apparently at the moment, according to Mr Bartle, there are 200 people per day turned away from homelessness services in relation to housing availability, to waiting lists, to levels of homelessness. They're all getting worse. So it is really important that we act on this, and that's why I commend the motion as it is. We need to not have a complicated approach to this. We need to move on it quickly, because this crisis in housing is not improving, it's getting worse. And just quoting from the submission that was written by the Tenants' Union to the Law Reform Institute, in brief, between 2000 and 2019, house prices in Hobart have increased by 305%, from $117,750 to $478,000 as an average. And between 2016 to 2019, rents increased by 36% in Hobart City. Since 2007, the public housing waiting list has increased by 28%, from 2,625 applicants to 3,373 applicants, and we've got similar figures for the public housing wait list as well. So in essence, we've got a crisis. We've got the worst affordability in Hobart. Short stay accommodation fixing won't fix the whole problem, but it will certainly be a huge increase in improving it, I would have thought.
Alderman Briscoe.
I speak to the amendment.
To the amendment, yes.
Yes, look, the Deputy may have access to that information. I would have thought, rather than going to the Tenants' Union, you would go to Housing Connect, which is the central body which would give you the statistics for housing provided for homeless. So I can't understand going to the Tenants' Union for that. But anyway, they have got a significant role in helping tenants, but they probably haven't got a significant role in housing people. I can't understand. Tell me how we're going to solve affordability of houses in Hobart by putting controls on short stay accommodation providers. Tell me how we can control the rents when we know the rents went down because of a mandate and also mandate from the government was saying that you couldn't evict tenants, and also many landlords reduced the rents during the time of the COVID. So I fail to understand the logic that's been expressed by the Deputy, sadly, that the Tenants' Union does not house, that we can solve some of the problem, appears, according to the Deputy, by having further controls on short-term accommodation. And Barcelona is not Hobart. Barcelona has, probably in this present moment it has very little visitors, but Barcelona gets millions and millions and millions of visitors. I've been to Barcelona twice actually. It is like Venice, it's just overrun with tourists. Going through that beautiful cathedral and going through other great things in that town. It's not Hobart. Hobart has not got the issues that Barcelona have got. So trying to import a solution from Barcelona to me is making the issue here greater than it is. I think my colleague Alderman Barakis has said in the past, we have a supply problem. We may not be able to solve the supply problem in Hobart, and as I said in the committee, we should consider it as a greater Hobart problem. And knowing new housing subdivisions are in Glenorchy, in Kingston, in Clarence, that's where affordable housing and maybe affordable rents are going to happen. Not in the capital city where we know there are many people from the mainland moving down here. Maybe that's the reason why house prices are going up. It's got nothing in my view, or very little to do with short-term accommodation providers. Now, I think this is an amendment to put some perspective in the motion that's been moved by you and Councillor Ewan. In other words, I'd like to know the figures of the economic benefit. I'd like to know homelessness, the affordability, and underutilised accommodation for homeless and other social housing needs. I would like to know that, but I'd like to think that we do it as a whole rather than just concentrating on one small part, as Councillor Coates said at the committee. It's a very complex, the market is changing rapidly. It's a complex situation where we can't just, there's no magic bullet. And if people think there's a magic bullet, they are sadly mistaken in my view.
Okay, further discussion on the amendment. Actually, I need another seconder for the amendment because the other seconder has left. So would someone else like to second the amendment? Sorry? Oh, doesn't it? Okay. No worries. Councillor Harvey.
Lord Mayor,
On the amendment.
I'm speaking to the amendment. Any changes or relaxation to the directive will be a matter for the Minister and or the Tasmanian Planning Commission, and a report that investigates the mechanisms and approach to making the case for such a change would be the first step in the Council's deliberation on the matter. Thank you, GM, for those words. And that's where I'm starting from here. So I won't be supporting the proposed amendment because, as the Deputy Lord Mayor said, it makes it much more complex to write the report. And maybe once we've investigated the mechanisms and the approach to see whether or not we can make a case for limiting or not limiting the number of whole dwellings used for short stay accommodation, that's when maybe this information becomes relevant. Because it might be that we discover that we don't need to do this research because the state government will provide that research as part of their determination if we go forward with requesting that short stay accommodation be regulated a bit more strictly, and maybe in the same way that we have regulated it, or it's been regulated in Battery Point. So there already is that mechanism that has occurred already. So I'm not keen to support the amendments, and I don't think we should support them because it will complicate the process. I see this as a really simple process to start with before we start drilling down into what information we need to provide versus what information the state government will need to use to determine whether they agree with us or not. So No, I encourage people not to support the amendment.
Okay, further discussion on the amendment. Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just speaking on the amendment, and look, I was one of the members, well, the member in the committee that voted against the motion when we debated it on Monday. But look, notwithstanding that, I think the amendment does drastically improve. If we are going to go down this path of directing city employees to compile a report, and if a concern, as we've heard, has been raised is in regards to the housing market and homelessness, you know, it's self-evident to me that some of the work that should be done should be these four things. And I think what the elected members proposed here is eminent, makes sense. I mean, we would want information to come back to talk about the levels of homelessness. We would want it to come back and talk about, well, what are the actual current levels of Airbnb. We would want it to come back and look at, well, what are those sort of, you know, the otherwise sections of the economic return. And obviously, point number 4, the proportion of the underutilisation emergency in short term. So, you know, as someone who voted against the motion and as it stands now, and I'll speak to that when I get to it, you know, but this amendment does drastically improve it. I don't see that it necessarily invalidates the original motion. You know, this adds to it, and I think gives more scope to ultimately the executive when they're carrying out this work. And if we're going to ask them to do something, at least ask them to do it, you know, wholly and fully, so we can get the best information back ultimately for what will foreshadow decisions that we make. So, look, I do think the amendment has merits, and I'll be supportive of the amendment to the motion. Thanks.
Okay, any further discussion on the amendment? Sorry, there's one more speaker, Councillor Alderman Thomas. Alderman Brackus.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, Lord Mayor, I agree with one of the comments that the Deputy Lord Mayor made. This does, you know, in some sense complicate the motion, but this isn't a simple issue. This isn't an issue that we can just narrow down to such a narrow point. And look, whilst I think the motion that's brought before the council is a better motion than the one that went to committee, purely for the fact that I think, you know, it's one of the first times I've seen a request for a report that's taking a policy direction as a given before we've actually made a policy decision. You know, this is, for better or worse, and, you know, look, I'm sure that there definitely are merits to doing this. There are consequences to doing this. And this isn't an issue that exists in isolation on its own. It is an issue that plays within a very complex housing market and what's becoming an increasingly complex housing market. We have multiple sets of data that we need to make sure... We've got multiple sets of data that tell completely different stories. And it's not a matter of saying, we don't like this set or we prefer this set. It's a matter of just making sure that whatever decisions we're making, especially if they're policy decisions that have huge ramifications for the good or for the bad, that we're doing these based on accurate information, and we're doing this based on information that is telling us the story that we need to be getting told to make a decision. I'll just note, you know, whilst we were here talking, whilst I was listening about the different data sets, my understanding, I've got the information sheet in front of me. The state government's, the state parliament's Short Stay Accommodation Act 2019 actually requires short stay accommodation providers under law to provide them information quarterly. So if we're talking about we need the information straight from Airbnb, whichever providers, they're required under law to provide quarterly information. Information which is to be displayed includes the planning permit number for the premises, or a statement that the premises does not require a planning permit, or a statement that the premises has existing use rights established under Section 12 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act. You know, the information that the state government has, which was released last week, which tells a completely different story to the data set that was provided by Inside Airbnb, you know, it isn't something we should be palming off because we don't think it tells the full story, because it does, and it does narrow down between primary residences and non-primary residences. And if we're comparing the data sets, this is straight off the Inside Airbnb website. Inside Airbnb project was brought to you by Murray Cox. Murray Cox is an independent digital storyteller, a community activist and technologist. You know, so look, whilst I'm sure I'm not criticising the intent behind putting together these data sets for the benefit of the community, if Mr. Cox, you know, is of the view that there's an issue that needs to be addressed, and perhaps there is, but we do need to be looking under the context of, you know, if we have a community activist providing us data sets, is there any, you know, either deliberate or incidental biases in the information that's being provided? The information that's being provided by Inside MBB doesn't specify between primary and non-primary listings. So look, I think the information that's being suggested to be sought in the amendment by Alderman Thomas, you know, will go a long way to providing us the information that we need. And I think it doesn't detract from the intent of the motion. I think it actually improves it and allows us, if and when this report does come back, for us to make a decision with a full set of knowledge. And, you know, just listening to Councillor Harvey's comments, it does sound like a bit of Groundhog Day, where we're asking, you know, a state government department to do our homework for us that we should be doing ourselves. So look, I'll be supporting the amendment. I think it's a great amendment, and I think it does improve the motion that we've got in front of us.
Okay, Councillor Dutton?
Thank you, Chair. No, I think the amendment, the 4 points, they have merits, and I would quite want to support that. But at the same time, I'm thinking that if it doesn't go through, if it's not passed, then we will lose those 4 points or the elements and the suggestions that there. Therefore, I'm suggesting that maybe what we need to do, because if we take that on board, it changes the original motion, and therefore my reluctance to support that. Hence, I'm wanting to suggest that what we need to do, either have it as a preamble or as an addition to say that the staff, where practicable, takes note of this and includes it in their report. That way, we don't lose it. Thank you.
Councillor Dutta, I was going to suggest something similar to Alderman Thomas myself. So you'd have to suggest it to Alderman Thomas as to whether he would accept that that as a change to the motion. It might be something like that the report includes information on, rather than that other starting sentence, or something like that. But Councillor Dutta, you might want to talk to Alderman Thomas about your suggestion.
Okay, so my suggestion is, you know, that we simply take those points on board wherever practicable, so that we don't lock ourselves in any way to say we must do this. You know, wherever you think it's practicable, it's worthy to take those point of view, we do. But we are not locked into those 4 points, because I think it will restrict it.
So Alderman Thomas, actually I'll speak now if I can, because it's sort of relevant. One of my major concerns with your amendment is the first sentence about the priority and all this sort of thing. I just wonder whether it says something like that the report includes information on, instead of the sentence you've got.
If that's what's needed, Lord Mayor, I'm happy to take out the reference to first priority. As long as it comes back in the report, that's fine. It's just got to be included. That's all. And I thank Councillor Dutta and yourself for that suggestion.
Now, the only thing is we don't have the seconder here anymore,
So we're going to have to get a new seconder.
we'd need a new seconder. Alderman Barakis, are you happy with that as well? Yeah, all right.
Now, the reason why I'm concerned about this, it's just changed. It's actually changed quite significantly. So that's why, if I may, Lord Mayor, just raising my concerns in relation to this. I think if we do that, we are still confounding and slowing down.
You might need to move for some extra time. So
I'm happy to move that the deputy does have extra time, 2 minutes extra time.
Seconded by Councillor Dutta. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Continue, please.
Lord Mayor, I still think that this change actually doesn't improve the situation at all, because we are talking about officer time on something that needs to be done out of, you know, like it's an urgency. We're talking about a homelessness issue, and we're looking at information that we have before us as part of this motion. If we introduce all these other things, I think it still confounds the intent of the motion. So I don't support this. I don't think a compromise. Whilst I enjoy compromising where I can, I don't know, maybe not enjoy, but I will. I don't think that this is appropriate at this point, because I think we need to have something quite clear, quite concise, and just get on with that.
Okay. Any further discussion on the amendment? Councillor Sherlock?
Yeah, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Look, I understand what Alderman Thomas is trying to put forward, and I do. While I do understand also what Councillor Dutta is trying to achieve, I also agree with the Deputy Lord Mayor. I personally don't think that the amendment is needed for this particular motion. And I would encourage people to not probably support this amendment. And the reason why I say that is perhaps Alderman Thomas could instead do what Alderman Zuko did last week when an amendment came, when a motion had come through for a parking issue within and the revenue within North Hobart. He actually came back last week and put up his own original motion that was in the same vicinity or ballpark of that topic. So perhaps Alderman Thomas could be encouraged to do that as opposed to adding this as an amendment, because in my opinion it substantially changes the amendment, but that's just my opinion on it. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Okay, well, I think I will put that amendment. Oh, sorry, sum up.
Look, I just want to make it quite clear. This is an opportunity.
Sorry, Alderman Thomas. You don't sum up on an amendment, just on a motion. So that's just advice from the General Manager. So I will put the amendment by Alderman Thomas, second by...
With the changes you
suggest.
suggest.
Change the report include information on. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no.
No.
Show of hands, please. All those in favour.
Councillor Coates, Alderman Baracus, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe.
Against.
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Ewan, Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
Lord Mayor, that's lost 6 votes to 4 or 4 votes to 6.
Okay, now we go back to the substantive motion. So who would like to speak next on the substantive motion? Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And look, I can appreciate, reading through the rationale and listening to the elected member's contribution. I really do appreciate where this is coming from. It's been raised before, and it's something I talk about, which is in regards to, obviously, the housing market in Hobart. I've said it before, we're becoming an exclusive city, if you like, a city of and for millionaires, and that is a challenge. But as I stand here today, in the housing market and the rental market in Hobart, we currently have extraordinary circumstances. We've got no evictions taking place. We've got 4 major hotels currently removed from the market because they're being used for medical reasons. What we do know of is that in the next year, we may or may not have students returning, international students. We do know that we will have a big hotel next to Parliament House. We'll have a Movenpick Hotel. We'll have Vibe Hotel. We'll have a new student accommodation on Melbourne Street coming into the market. We see in the rationale and we hear of it a slight change within the market, if you like, resulted in a significant decrease in rents, a significant ability for people to actually be able to find a house. And yet we're asking, as a council, we're going to be asking our executive to spend their valuable time and resources putting together a report that goes through the ways in which they could adjust the planning scheme. I mean, to me, this is just putting the cart before the horse. We don't know. No one knows. We could ask them to report it now and it'd be meaningless. No one knows what the market's going to be like in 6 or 12 months. At the moment, we are in the most extraordinary time, and we have the most extraordinary number of interventions that are happening at the moment. We've got, quite frankly, a completely distorted tourism market, a completely distorted housing market, and such an uncertain world. But for us to then, I mean, it's like everyone agreeing that we're going to have electric cars in the very short-term future, and yet we all sit here and argue about a policy on fuel prices. I mean, it just will not be relevant. We're seeking to, by raising this at the moment, sort of elevate this issue and bring in this sort of fear of controls and asking, frankly, for time and resources to be spent on something that we're focusing here on the what's possible to do, what can we do to the planning code. But we actually need to go back and look at the why. And that question can't be answered at the moment because we've just, frankly, we've got a market at the moment, it's so changing and so different. We might find ourselves in a situation where, frankly, we don't have as much demand for short-term accommodation, for hotel accommodation. We don't have, I can easily foresee where the university can't rent out all their premises and they drop their price to the floor. They're about to have the best part of 600 rooms available and, frankly, might struggle to fill them. So us spending all this time and going down this path of looking at ways to regulate and try and control short stay accommodation market is, to my mind, just something we shouldn't be doing at this point in time. And look, I do appreciate where it's coming from. I don't think there's necessarily any ill intent, but I just think as an organisation, when we, if you like, sitting at a board level, at the elected members' council level, we shouldn't be directing the executive and the officers to spend their time compiling information such as this that frankly is just putting the cart before the horse, and I don't think will be of any use. And when ultimately when you go and seek a report, the idea is so that you can come back and make a decision. And the amendments that just lost will have helped in that, because when this report comes back, there is, to my mind, there is no decision to be made. When it comes back, all the decision will be made is, oh, actually, we need another report. And so I just do not see that, in some ways, I think this sort of seeks to go further down rather than doing the first steps. And frankly, I just don't see it as something we should be doing at this moment. So I won't support the motion.
Alderman Brackus, you haven't spoken, have you?
The amendment, I haven't spoken to the substantial, Lord Mayor, thank you. Look, I suppose what Councillor Coates said is a fair point. We're going to get a report that's going to come back, and then we may or may not get another report with the information that Alderman Thomas suggested if we cross that, if we need to. It seems that it would be actually less work for the council if we were to get a comprehensive and thorough report in the first place and not go back and forward. But, look, as the Deputy Lord Mayor said, we have a housing crisis, and the housing crisis is getting worse. That's completely correct. But, and exactly as I said in committee, council's not the solution to this problem. Council is the problem. As it was said multiple times in committee that a small change or a small reduction in short stay accommodation numbers would have a large impact on rental vacancy rates. If that's true, the same is also true. The small increase in residential dwellings or housing supply would have a big impact on rental vacancies. So for us to be making this, one problem's more than the other. No, the issue is one of housing supply. Any impact that short stay accommodation is having to housing supply any impact that short stay accommodation is having to the rental prices or to the housing crisis is by virtue of its reducing housing supply. The issue is supply. Council has some pretty significant levers that it can apply in helping to increase housing supply, but as up until now has been completely resistant in using them. So it seems that we're now looking at, we can, if we blame it on Airbnb, we can continue doing whatever it is that we want to do. We can continue voting down multiple residential applications, many of which are recommended for approval and actually easily and well and truly compliant with planning scheme, with planning scheme, and then we can say no, this is short stay accommodation's fault. Look, I'm sure short stay accommodation is playing a role, and perhaps there is merit to this, but we can't go into this, get a report, and the report be worded as such that the end results are given and the policy direction that the council is going to take is a fait accompli. We've got we had a bunch of extra information that would have helped us make an informed decision that we've just voted down. Also, we can sit here as a council and say, well, look, we have a bunch of really significant levers in as far as how we regulate what people do on their own property. Perhaps the solution to this is to further regulate what people can do on their own property. It's been us limiting people's ability to develop on their own property that's been artificially restricting housing supply. So what we're going to do is further restrict what people can do. That's not a solution to the problem. The solution is to allow the housing supply to increase as population's been increasing. Now, we've got multiple sets of data. We've got data provided by somebody that's a self-described community activist, and we've got official data supplied by the state government that does actually break down the difference between primary residences and non-primary residences. And I think the idea that we'd be choosing to rely, rather than relying on the official data that's been provided by the state government directly via the short stay providers required under law, we're instead going to rely on the information provided by somebody who's a self-described community activist. We need to be really, really careful that we are making a decision based on correct information. And perhaps that's something that the officers need to reflect on as to what information they base their report on. But if we're making our decision based on poor information, our policy decision is going to be poor. And it's not a policy we're going to fix this and we're going to change this and everything's going to be great. If we start limiting or putting caps on short stay accommodation, what impact is that going to have on the value of housing? What impact is that going to have on the rate base in Hobart? If there's a limit to the number.
30 seconds.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. If there's an impact to the number of people that can use Airbnb or short stay, and suddenly that number's been limited, does that mean that the value of properties that already have those permits shoot through the roof? Look, we've just decided today that we're not going to be supporting a fully informed report, and what we've got is only partial, so I won't be supporting this. I wouldn't be encouraging anybody to be supporting this, and I'd be hoping Alderman Thomas would be foreshadowing his amendment as a foreshadowed motion, because I think if we are going to do this, it needs to be done right, and I don't think that's what this motion is.
Okay, further discussion? Councillor Harvey.
I have a question, Lord Mayor, to the Director of Planning. Could I get an idea of the approval rate for DAs from the council? Council's been accused of being the problem and I believe that's a false accusation. Could you please elaborate on the percentage of DAs associated with housing that the council has passed or agreed to?
Mr. Noy.
Through you, Lord Mayor. Look, I don't have the specific numbers or percentages, but the vast majority, over 95%, are for approvals, and less than 5% would be for refusals of all applications that we deal with.
And so, Lord Mayor, the accusation that the council is the problem is just not factual. So we'll leave it there. What I'm interested in, Lord Mayor, is understanding the process of how, if we decided to go down the path of changing the relative directive with regard to short stay accommodation, if we did decide to take that path, I'd like to know what the process is. So I think that's really important. The process and what are the options that we might like to take if we were of the mind to try and seek stronger regulation from the state government. And packing that report full of information, as we've seen from Alderman Thomas, which was rejected by a majority of the council, I don't think is the way to go. I see this as quite a simple process. The officers can report back on how the mechanisms work to getting a change to the directive with regard to short stay accommodation. As simple as that. That's when we decide if we want to pursue it based on data going into the future. But for now, I'm interested in, can we actually do this? Is it a process that we want to pursue? And we could take the comparison from Battery Point, for example. how did this occur in Battery Point and nowhere else in the city? Was it because the Battery Point residents lobbied the council or the state government? I don't know. I'd like to understand the process. So that's why I'll be supporting the motion tonight, because I think it's important to understand what the tools are that could potentially help resolve the housing crisis in Tasmania. And we know short stay accommodation is a contributing factor. And I think Alderman Barakis mentioned that as well. But we need to know how we go about changing something if indeed we do want to change. So the state government is the final arbitrator of this, or the Tas Planning Commission, but we don't know, and I don't know what the process is. What are the options that we have in front of us? So I think this report could resolve that for us. And when it comes to blaming the council for the housing crisis, I think that's really disingenuous, and the data just doesn't stack up, and trying to build a false negative narrative about the council is just, I think very disappointing.
Got a question, Lord Mayor.
Alderman Barakis.
Thank you. Through you to the Director of Planning. Were those the 95%? I've got two questions. Sorry, the 95% to 5% that you referred to, was that just housing, or did that include things from balconies to bus stops?
Mr. Noy.
Through you, Lord Mayor. Sorry, I couldn't provide the specifics, but other than to say that it was in the order of 5% across the board, not just residential. It might be, yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. So it's not just for housing. And the second question, and it might be one you might have to provide a notice. I'm not sure if it's going to substantially change the result of tonight's vote, but how many dwellings have been rejected by council in DAs since we've declared a housing crisis?
Look, I believe we've circulated that figure previously as a response to a question without notice, but I don't have it in front of me, so I'd have to take it on notice.
Thank you very much.
Recirculate.
Thanks a lot.
Okay. Alderman Briscoe, I think you might have spoken. You've got a question, have you?
I spoke on the amendment.
I think you spoke to begin with on the substantive as well.
So did Councillor Harvey?
No, I spoke to the amendment.
Well, I'll ask some questions then, if that's okay.
Sure.
Or someone could give Alderman Briscoe 2 minutes.
I think you spoke about the tenants' union in your first intervention.
First intervention sounds
yes,
like...
or your first time you spoke.
All right, I'll ask questions.
Yeah. Go for it.
Okay. Through you, Lord Mayor, to the Director. He earns his money, the Director of Planning. Yeah. Have we done any mapping of short stay accommodation in Hobart, suburb by suburb?
Mr. Noy.
Yes, through you, Lord Mayor, we have that mapping on our council website.
Through you, Lord Mayor, was there any concentration of short stay accommodation apart from any problem areas, problem suburbs, apart from Battery Point?
Mr. Noy, do you...
Look, the data that we've got on our website, it totals around 406 short stay approvals that we've issued over the last 5 years, I believe. And they are heavily concentrated on the inner city suburbs of Hobart, as opposed to further out in regions like Luna Valley or Lower Sandy Bay, for example.
So while the Director's on his feet, so would you envisage that you could have controls on inner city short stay accommodation rather than the outer suburb short stay accommodation? If there is an issue with...
Yeah, well, I'm sure that could be possible, and an expansion of the Battery Point provisions might be appropriate if that's...
Okay, and just finally, and this question comes from Alderman Harvey, because I thought that we went through the explanation of why Battery Point was
Question, was it?
The question, I just had to give you a background. So, can you give us the history of the prohibition of short stay accommodation whole houses in Battery Point? I know you did this to us in the planning meeting, but obviously people didn't remember.
Mr Noy, if you could answer that, there's a couple of elected members that have to leave, so, but if you can answer that as...
Right. Yes, Lord Mayor. The prohibition first appeared in under the Battery Point Planning Scheme, 1979, and that was transposed into the Hobart Interim Planning Scheme. However, the planning directive issued by the Minister initially allowed short stay accommodation to occur in Battery Point, and so contrary to the wishes of this council and to a number of residents within the suburb, and following lobbying by both council and residents of that suburb, the Minister chose to amend the directive and prohibited short stay accommodation, a standalone short stay accommodation in Battery Point.
And the main reason, through you, Lord Mayor, the main reason why, what was the main reason why we were worried about a proliferation of short stay accommodation in Battery Point?
I think the principal concern was converting the residents and that community into a transient community of visitors, and leaving the community fractured as a result of that change in use.
Good, thank you.
Like Barcelona.
Councillor Dutta?
Thank you. Just
sorry, Alderman Thomas, sorry, just a minute.
As indicated previously, several days ago, I was meant to leave at 6:30, had to. I have to leave now. Thanks for the debate. If the vote had been taken, I would have voted against.
Thank you, Alderman Thomas.
Because of the reasons I put forward.
Okay. Thank you, Alderman Thomas. Councillor Dutta, did you want to...
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Just a question through you to the Director. The 4 points that was raised by Alderman Thomas and the suggestions in them, would they consider taking some of that information and bringing them in the report?
Mr Noy.
Yes, through you, Lord Mayor. I think the case, if we are to go forward with an amendment either to the Commission or to the Minister, the case will need to be made that there is an issue being created by the current policy settings. So we will need to demonstrate that what we're proposing in the way of a change will affect, overcome that issue. So if it is a concern around access to housing, then we'll need to make that case before the Minister and or the TPC would approve such change.
Thank you for that. I'm aware of the time that we've spent in this. So I just want to make 3 very simple points. Firstly, it is my understanding, and what I recall, is that in the committee we unanimously voted for this particular motion that we're debating. That's my understanding. I said it's my understanding. Sorry that my memory lapses every now and then, and I'm sure most of us...
Point of clarification, I think I voted against.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I said it's my understanding, and my memory lapse. It wasn't unanimous, but it was 5-1. So I correct that. So it was quite, it was a majority decision. So therefore, nothing has changed in the original motion. It still stands as the way I read it. The second point I want to make here is this, that unfortunately, the council has been demonized as being the problem. And I've heard it many times. When I say it's demonized, please understand that the definition can be varied. It is a global definition, and you can interpret it one way and I can interpret it another way. But what I'm saying, I feel that when that term is used and sometimes connected to a green ideology, it packs the whole lot of us together in that particular one sentence. So the point I'm making is that we've got to be careful, because when we make statements like that, we are the problem, all of us are, collectively. And I think that's really, for me, is not a very comfortable position to be. We don't have the time to go on into that. I'd love to, but I'm conscious and aware of that. But I think that point needs to be made. And thirdly, the third point I want to make is this, that while in Battery Point the prohibition was made, circumstances over the years, over time, changes, and therefore, if that particular element moves to another suburb, we can extend it to another suburb. So I don't find any problem with that. If that was historically made, you can still argue your case, and the director has made a clear position statement that if you need to bring about a change, we need to state our case. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Further discussion? Any further discussion? Councillor Yuen?
Question through you to the director. Just wondering if there's any information on the social inclusion index on Airbnb and residential vacancy, perhaps?
No.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear that question.
Social inclusion index, social inclusion dashboard.
Actually thought maybe Pete might be more appropriate to answer this question.
I think so.
Mr. Carr?
Through you, Lord Mayor, yes, there's Airbnb data, short-term rental accommodation data on the social inclusion dashboards. That information comes from a source called All the Rooms, which is a reputable organisation.
As opposed to any other organisation.
All right. Any other contributions before I ask Councillor Yuen to sum up? Did you? No. Okay, I'm going to say just a few words. And sorry, I know Councillor Sherlock is also planning to leave soon. But look, I think what this motion requires now or asks is that we get an update and we get an independent report from our staff about an issue that I think we've all got strong views on, as does our community. And so it's really important that we know housing is one of our top issues. We've all recognised that this is having some impact on the rental market. And so what we're asking is for independent advice, and that's really important because we've all received different versions of interpretations of data in the last few days, and our staff can sort through this, and it's important they do because this is affecting housing. This is not an attack on Airbnb hosts. No one is suggesting that visitor accommodation is the sole source of woes for tenants in Hobart, but it certainly is a factor. It does have an impact on supply. How big that supply factor is, we don't know. The report will tell us. I wanted to pick up on Alderman Barakas's suggestion that housing supply will fix everything. But I think one of the concerns is that we could approve an apartment block of 20 and under the current rules, 15 of those could become investor properties that are left vacant for a lot of the time, put into visitor accommodation and then used by the owner, the absentee owner, some of the other rest of the time. And that is the formula that the advice from the housing experts says is a very attractive formula to people who've got resources, who want to have a bolt hole in Hobart. So unless we sort of tackle both supply and also the conversion of rental properties to visitor accommodation, this could go from being 10% of our rental market to 15% to 20%. We have no cap on this at the moment, and there is a real risk. So we need to do our research about, maybe it's okay at the moment, maybe as Councillor Coates says, there'll be, the hotels will absorb all of the tourists and things will be fine, but we need to know what the mechanisms are, because there is also a very strong possibility this will grow, and this model will grow into all of the new supply, or a lot of the new supply that we approve. I wanted to make the point that we do know that we have a problem. We're back to our initial vacancy rate that we were pre-COVID, but we also know that there was a 22% drop in Airbnb listings during COVID. So there's some really strong data that shows that that did give us some more supply, and that was helpful. And I know people personally that that took up tenancies in former Airbnb premises. We know that many research agencies without a commercial interest in regulation have flagged this as an issue, and I just wanted to particularly mention the Reserve Bank of Australia. They noted in their September meeting minutes that rental supply has been boosted by short-term and holiday rentals being brought onto the long-term rental market. So this is something that's happening around the country. And so, you know, we know that there is a juxtaposition between short stays and rental supply, but in our city, because we are a tourism city and we're a small city and it's concentrated in our suburbs, it's a bigger problem. And that is the nub of the issue. We all love sharing, we all love the sharing economy, and that is the battery point model. It's what the battery point model is meant to do. The government data is really problematic. The host self-declares whether they need a permit or not. Nobody is checking. We're not checking, Airbnb's not checking, the government's not checking. Nobody knows. A recent article in the Mercury found that more than 700 addresses used in the government's data did not match the properties. So look, this is we know that at least 400 properties are official through the permits we've offered. We think there's potentially another double that are people that have said that they don't need a permit and are saying it's their permanent residence, but have got all sorts of other arrangements to not disclose that. We don't know exactly. But I think all we are doing at this stage is getting the advice. It's good, prudent policy making. All of us agree that housing is an issue. This is one of the factors in this issue, and I really look forward to receiving the report, because a few years ago we had a lot of discussion about visitor accommodation, and there has been a period of with not having information on it. So I think it's a really good opportunity for us to get an update from our staff. Thank you. Councillor Ewan, did you want to sum up at all?
I think in the interest of time, and because I've been working since 5 a.m, I would like to not. Thank you.
All right, so I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no.
Aye.
Show of hands, all those in favour.
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Ewan, Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
Against?
Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Briscoe.
It's carried, Lord Mayor, 6 votes to 3.
Okey-doke. Moving on to item 15, which is the Economic Development and Communications Committee.
Lord Mayor, I have to leave, sorry.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Sherlock. So we need someone to move this for Alderman Thomas.
I'll move it on for the purposes of discussion.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Ewan. Would anyone like to speak to this? This came up to a special before committee, before council. No one want to speak to it? All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Finance and Governance Committee, we also don't have that chairperson. Would someone like to move that? Deputy Lord Mayor?
Yes, I'll move that the council endorse the annual plan progress report for the period ended 30th September, which was attachment A on item 6.2 of the Finance and Governance Committee agenda.
Second by Councillor Ewan. Would anyone like to speak to this item? No. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 10, Financial Hardship Assistance Policy.
This, Lord Mayor. And just make the point that whilst we have set aside a certain amount of money, we've only had 10% of those funds requested for and distributed in relation to the financial hardship assistance policy. So, which may mean that there are others who might need to access it later, but this is suggested, and this was moved to committee, that it cease as of the 31st of March 2021 and reviewed if necessary at that point.
Okay, any discussion? No discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 18, financial report.
This is a good meeting for the Chair of Finance not to be at. I move the financial report as at the 30th September. So move that.
Seconded by Councillor Ewan.
And just make the point that I thank the council officers for the work that they're doing in trying to save money in this straitened time. The underlying result was budgeted or estimated to be 0.672 million, so $672,000, but now we have a deficit, thanks to COVID, of $12.478 million. And there are, in this, these estimates listed, various savings and increases in spending in various areas, but I mean, serious consideration in relation to this deficit and how we go forward. So we'll be keeping a very close eye on how we perform over the next little while.
Further discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. 1920 financial statements.
Lord Mayor, this is the audited financial statements which are located in the report. So I'll move that these be noted.
Second by Councillor Harvey.
And again, there's the auditors were okay or happy with what was going on in light of the circumstances.
Any discussion? No discussion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 20.
Move that this former Magistrates Court summons be written off.
Councillor Dutta. Second by Councillor Dutta. Any discussion? No discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 21 is the Parks and Recreation Committee. Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you. I was thinking that we should have sitting fees at an hourly rate. The people who are here should get more. Yes, I'll move the motion that's on the books.
Seconded by Alderman Barakis.
In the interest of time, it's just very straightforward. Lease of 2 buildings located in the Domain Regatta Grounds, foreshore for a period of 10 years, but it is proposed that the lease include a clause that allows the city to renegotiate the terms and conditions in the event of any development which should proceed in that vicinity of the foreshore. So it's only 2 small sheds on the foreshore there. I think it's just clearing up something that they've been using anyway.
Did that get a seconder?
I don't know.
Alderman Barakis, I think.
Oh, yeah, Alderman Barakis, yeah. Any discussion? No discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 22.
I move the item that's on the books.
Seconded by Councillor Ewan.
Yeah, I did some media on this the other day, and they had the Tasmanian Fire Service on just prior to me, and they gave a very good, clear outline that there's no place in Tasmania that is that it can be protected from ember attack with a strategy. So everyone needs to, wherever you are in Tasmania, including all suburbs of Hobart, need to have a strategy. The city's bushfire management strategy is due for review, and when updated would include reference to the ember attack defence. They did put me on the spot, the media I did, saying, what would you do? I said, clear out my gutters, have a very defendable space around my house, be prepared to put out the embers as they land on me, but if it's too much, I'd get in my car and go. You know, I'm not going to lose my life because of a few embers. Anyway, so the recommendation of the council is actually engage the Local Government Association and the Tasmanian Fire Service and the Cooperative Research Centre to jointly produce a guide for residents how to cost-effectively retrofit bushfire protection to existing houses, and then incorporate a new section in the city's bushfire management strategy. I think those who've lived in the city for a while, or for most of our lives, we know that bushfire is always a risk. Embers have always been a risk. We shouldn't be scaring people. Most people are aware of the bushfire risk if they live in Hobart, and I think this is a sensible strategy.
Discussion? Further discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Item 23, Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you, Councillor Reynolds, Lord Mayor. I've moved the item that's on the books.
Seconded by Councillor Dutta.
So it's just one of the tenures of our current members for the Wellington Park Management Trust expires. It needs to be re-nominated, and the committee nominated Alderman Thomas unanimously. So I just move the motion as it is.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes.
So, if Alderman Thomas is not on council during the term, does he still represent the council?
No.
So you step down
Yes,
if you...
Yep.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Okay, we're now going to move into the closed portion. If someone would
So
like to
moved.
move that. Moved by Councillor Harvey, seconded by Deputy Lord Mayor. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. So for anyone watching, we are now leaving. We're moving into our closed portion, and wish you all a very Merry Christmas.